What's up, guys? Chasing Lamely here, and welcome back to From Grove to Glory, episode number 19 on the channel. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Full disclosure up front, by the way, guys, I've had to re-record the commentary for this episode because I had some issues with OBS. So you'll be getting no game sound today because nothing recorded, no commentary, no game sound, no nothing. So today we're going to the Grand Prix at Rio. And this is me just going through the track, guys, showing what we need for today. We've got changeable weather, practicing qualifying, heavy on the tyres, and our car is not quite good enough for the track. In theory, on paper, we are currently sitting 4th in the Constructors Championship, however, just behind Red Bull. And yeah, the car is, well, the drivers are massively outperforming the car, if we're completely honest here. But yeah, just I thought we'd go through the inbox so you can see that Hamilton won the last Grand Prix in Japan. Which if you've missed, pause this, go back and watch it. Question from Sky Sports: Kubica has claimed our brakes are holding us back. What are we going to say? We're going to say that he needs to button it because he does. He needs to stop talking. It's not helping us with sponsors, and that's not what we're about. And the pit crew did okay in the last race with a pit stop just shy of 2 seconds. Although our record is 1.6 this season. So we're going to try and better that at some point for certain. And we've got a scouting report on Nelson Piquet Jr., the man involved in Crashgate all those many years ago. He's not good enough to be here. Picked up a couple of new pit crew members because these two guys at the top here, they look really good. It took me a while to figure out who to replace them with, so you're going to see a lot of random scrolling whilst I try and figure out who the guy that gets replaced is, because you know this guy's really good, and any opportunity we can take to improve our pit crew is well worth us taking. I think in the end, I think it was Swan that we replaced. We're about to find out because you know I can't remember that far back. That was a long time ago in my world. There we go. We made that work for us. We replaced him, and then we're going to bring in this guy Gadara as well in a second. And if we can find out who's good and who is worse than him, a lot of options for things like this. You've got the guy at the top there is just a really good jackman, so he's definitely staying in the team for the foreseeable future. We've got to keep an eye on contract lengths at the end of the season as well, because I think I've overhauled most of the pit crew at some point this season anyway. But yeah, it's just been a case of we've got such a good pit crew, by far the best pit crew on the grid, as you'd expect with Williams, that we are trying to improve it. And I think it was this guy Hendon that got replaced in the end. I think I was just doing a long explainer of like, this is who we're replacing and why we're replacing them and this kind of stuff. Was it him or was it someone else? I forget. It was either him or someone up top. Either way, we'll see in a second. Recording this after you do it rather than in real time, by the way, is really, really difficult. I'm just going to throw that out there. I forget who the guy we replaced was. Maybe it was this guy, Crust. Did we replace Crust with Gadara? Looks like we did, because that looks like the kind of hovering I do when making a decision. Yeah, that's me explaining that he's not actually not much worse than Gadara, but you know, Gadara is better all around, so we'll keep him, and then that's the sign button done. Boom, magic, problem solved. Right, on to the next thing, clearing the scouting screen, because we've got to clear the scouting screen, and then we've moved on because the car repair. We're doing the whole bunch of just playing through the week before the race, as we've been doing the last few episodes. So Nicolas Lapierre was recommended or was scouted, and he's not going to be good enough to make it. Fernando Alonso has decided to gain the permanent stat over I put next to him, like say George Russell for the long term. Once we don't need Kubica's money anymore, yeah, he's going to get a chance to learn from Fernando Alonso, which is going to be really good. And then we've got the preview of Rio de Janeiro, and we finish repairing both the cars, which gives us an opportunity to go and take a look at what we're doing with part design. Talking of which, the engine design is now ready, and we've got a political thing for spec engines. Sergei Sorokin apparently isn't good enough for Formula 1, which we already knew. Although I think I had a look just to see what his pay driver money is. I don't think it worked out being as good as Kubica, not that we'd have replaced Kubica for a vastly inferior driver who's paying us less. That's not the way that was ever going to play out for us. So we've got the vote here for spec engines. Spec engines are awful at Formula 1 level. They have a performance of 150, which is about an eighth as good as the one we have in the car right now. It's absolutely atrocious. Or a sixth, something like that. Anyway, either way, we're going to abstain from this vote. We're going to watch the votes come in, you're going to see that Cyril Abiteboul is a pain. I think he was the guy that was a pain. Oh no, it was the Ferrari guy whose name I always forget because it changes every 10 minutes. He decided he hated it a lot, so did Toto Wolff. And it was never ever going to go in the favour of the teams like Red Bull and Haas that were for this, and again, Force India for it as well. So, no spec engines. Spec engines are not a thing that are going to happen at any point in the near future, which is good to see. I think this is just me being like, who is the Italian guy, and why does, Toto Wolff hate progress? I don't know. Either way, this is a bit where we get to have a look at the new engine. The new engine is built for top speed, which is going to be good for us, and we're going to get into the improvements screen, and we're going to eventually, once I was done explaining a bunch of stuff, I talk way more when I'm trying to do it live than I want to when I'm doing it, back, which is probably a lesson to be learned. But we're going to clear out all of our reliability, so we can start getting the engine up to scratch, and then we're going to put the new engine in place of the older engine, so we can get that one up to the best it can possibly be by the end of the season, which is kind of the plan, although we're going to focus on the reliability first, because if the engine blows, we are done for. Right, having a look at the drivers just to clear that screen. The next guys we're getting are Junkadea and Simonauser, I think the guy's name is. Yeah, so that's just me doing that, and then we're going to travel to Rio, and we should be more or less at the point where we start to think about going into qualifying in just a second. Though we're looking at the HQ just to see if there's anything we can do to improve it with the money we have. The test track is almost ready. You can see our forecasting centre is nearly done, and our road car factory is about 6 months away, which is excellent. We're going to take the big sponsorship from Orlen. We're going to mess around with the tyres a bit. It's a medium tyre wear track with high fuel burn, so that's going to mean we're going to want less of the soft tyres and more of the ultra soft tyres, because ultimately you want to get the best qualifying position you can get. Because for the race it's going to be a one-stop, so you don't really need to have. We don't have as many tyres as we take anyway, but we need enough tyres to make sure we've got the knowledge we need for qualifying and for the race, and that's going to be what's important. I don't think I decided to change any of the parts off the top of my head, although I'm probably going to make myself a liar here. I think I went back into trying to decide whether or not I use this engine or not, and I'm definitely not going to use the engine. Do not panic. I know this was the moment where I decided maybe we could build a better engine, so we had a look at the engine to see if we could build something with more power than what we had, and we didn't think we could. So instead of doing that, we decided to see what our next best or our next worst part was, which I believe worked out as being the gearbox off the top of my head. So we went to see if we could design a better engine than what we've already got. Clicked on the few things, so top speed plus 10, reliability plus 10, top speed 40 to max with an extra build time, and then obviously we just had a look at everything. It was all a bit confusing for us, but we tried to make it work. Even with these top speed boosts or the extra slots or everything, there wasn't a lot we could do to make an engine better than the ones we had in progress. So we went to look at the gearbox and see if we could build a better gearbox than we had. So obviously we need to get a baseline of what our gearbox currently looks like, and our gearbox, as you're about to see, is our best gearbox currently sits at a 911 with a 950 top, which is pretty special. But we can probably build something better than that. So we had a quick look at that. I think that was what we ended up going with, although I cannot. That was a while ago. In fact, I think we went to make brakes because the brakes were the next part that we could improve. But let's keep an eye. Let's watch together, because honestly, I don't remember doing this recording. It's been a while. We did go into brakes. Let's see what we can do. We can do deceleration plus 25 to max. We can do 15 to max plus 20, and we can of course add another 2 days for plus 25 deceleration plus 5% reliability, which is going to bring us an 862 to 950 something. I can't read that, it's too small on the screen. Too small on the screen. I need to use to watch it back to re-record this, but that's how it sort of worked out. Gone through all the parts, go and give everything final confirmation if we can do it. Just making sure we can't add any extra parts, make things a bit better. We can't. So that, I think, is pretty much where we're going to end up with this this gearbox, or sorry, with these brakes. Confirm that £750,000 spent. Jobs are good, and we've got a new part in the design. And apparently we are better on the high-speed corners than a lot of the grid. And yeah, just kind of this is a general overview of just where we're sitting in terms of our rivals. We are behind on the gearbox. You know, the gearbox we're currently working on should be designable up to a point where we can do better, and we're going to go in here. We're going to pick our sponsors for the race, which I think we already did, and it should be time for us to go. So we're back after the qualifying and practice sessions, and you can see here that we've done very badly in qualifying. Robert Kubica were 20th on the grid. Fernando Alonso were 19th on the grid. We had a bit of a rain-soaked qualifying session where there was never really a period where the track was consistently dry enough or wet enough or at the same in a good time. It seemed like other teams were getting good times in on slick tyres, and then we couldn't, so we'd switch to wets, and we couldn't get a good time on wet tyres, we couldn't get good times on anything. So yeah, we're starting from the back of the grid, so it's going to be a long slog to the front of the grid. Had a little look at the forecast before the race, just to see if there was any rain forecast, and nothing was up, but because I can't see the last sort of quarter of the race, I made the decision to switch from the split strategy I was planning to putting Alonso on the same strategy as Kubica, going on the soft tyres to try and give him as long a run as possible towards the end of the race. We've also gone 4 laps down on fuel as per usual, because I feel like we can get a bit more. We've got the efficiency that we can get that back rather than trying to figure out how to burn it during the race as per usual. So there's 36 laps. I was trying to work out whether or not there was a kind of soft or super soft, or what the strat should be, but ultimately we settled on doing a soft to ultra strategy for the race. Obviously we could kind of adjust that with the engine modes as well, but it gives us a good solid grounding to just try and sit out everyone else's pit stops, because it's the kind of situation, the kind of race situation where the AI teams, they like to do a 2-stop strategy, and I thought maybe we could buy ourselves a few seconds, buy ourselves maybe a position or two by doing the 1-stop. So Hamilton and Vettel on the front row, Bottas, Leclerc on the second, Ricciardo in 5th, Verstappen in 6th. Apologies, by the way, the game was a bit stuttery, I don't know why. I was trying to figure it out at various points. So Hulkenberg and Sainz in 7th and 8th, followed by Raikkonen in 9th, Rahal in 10th. Moving on to the 6th row, we find Grosjean in 11th, next to Lando Norris. Lando Norris was ahead of Perez. Albon in 14th on the 7th row. 8th row of the grid gives us Kvyat and Pierre Gasly. The 9th row of the grid gives us Giovinazzi and Lance Stroll, and of course the 10th and final row sees Alonso sitting just ahead of Kubica, and you can see that we were 0.2 of a second off the pace even in Q1. It wasn't looking good for us, but we get a 5 red lights. We take the ERS off of auto. The 5 red lights stay on forever and they go out, and I had to turn the camera around because it put us behind this giant grandstand, so we'd never have seen the race, which is not what we wanted. And I decided very quickly that following Robert Kubica as he just kind of parked his car on the grid and waited for everyone else to disappear was not going to be entertaining for the episode, so I decided to stick to Fernando Alonso for as much of the first lap as possible. And Alonso made up some good positions early on, getting himself up into 17th, pretty much off the first corner. And yeah, things kind of kept getting better and better for him, as we're about to see, as long as the stuttering doesn't, drive me crazy. So, yeah, Alonso up into 16th, kind of sitting well, chasing Giovinazzi, definitely with the potential to make a bit more of himself given any semblance of opportunity, because that's kind of what he does. He's Fernando Alonso, it's what we expect of him. The important thing here in the early stage of the race was just keeping in touch with the cars around us. You can see there's kind of a split of strategies. A lot of teams deciding to go with the same strategy as us, starting on softs, trying to go as long into the race as possible. A couple of teams on the super softs, or a couple of drivers on super softs at least, Kvyat and Grosjean going with them, everyone else on the ultras. So the key here was really to try as quickly as possible to get us to at least being the top of the soft tired drivers, and then waiting out the pit stops and seeing how things rotated. So that's pretty much what we do on this first lap. We kind of trade 16th, 17th with Grosjean. We get into a bit of a scrap with Giovinazzi ahead of us too, which is always good fun. The first lap is always interesting as well on this game, because you can drop 50 places or you can drop no places at all. But Kubica, you can see already, come round off the first lap coming into the last couple of corners, and he was already half a second behind at one point. Half a second behind Stroll. He decided to have a go into this corner, picked up a great pile of time, which to be honest tells me Stroll made a mistake more than Kubica did anything particularly spectacular, because he's done nothing great so far. Sebastian Vettel's been given a 10-second penalty for cutting a corner on the first lap, which is not the time where you want to get penalties for anything. I didn't see it, obviously, because he's a long way up the road from me, but we're going to have to assume it was a racing incident of some kind, although it looks like it gave Graham Rahal the place ahead of him. And obviously remember, we are chasing down the Red Bull team. The Red Bull team are our kind of biggest rivals insofar as the Constructors Championship is concerned. So they are the ones we need to really worry about. We've given the push to our two drivers on the ERS, try and get them up through the field, because we needed to see Fernando Alonso doing more than sitting just in 15th, and also a few drivers around us going hybrid like Albon and Kvyat. It felt like it was just a good idea to try and make use of the ARS as early as possible. Get ahead as many of these cars as we possibly can. You can see Kubica also starts to make up some ground on Grosjean. Grosjean makes up ground on Albon. There's a whole bunch going on behind us. But Alonso works his way up into 12th by being on the ERS push, and gets himself ahead of Lando Norris, although there's still a scrap to be had for a few more laps yet, so do not panic. There is, as Alonso starts to try and catch up to Pierre Gasly, who is about 0.2 of a second ahead. You can see, I don't know why I'm telling you, you can see the gap closing. Raikkonen's been overtaken. We've taken Raikkonen, or we've had a go at Raikkonen here into this corner. We're already looking racy. We're already, we're set on the second lap, and we're already within striking distance of being top of the soft-tired drivers. Although Alonso is sort of scrapping for positions with Perez, with Raikkonen, just trying to find himself in some kind of rhythm, and Raikkonen's done quite badly in the early stage of this race. For a guy who's currently on the softer compounded tyre, Gasly, even in a Red Bull, shouldn't be starting to pull away from him. And you'll see the lap time there, 1:16. They will start to drop off rapidly towards the end of the race. I will tell you that much now. Kubica's taken 16th in the background there, just quietly plugging away, doing his thing. Interesting that Kvyat and Grosjean, despite being on slightly softer tyres than us, weren't making any real headway up the field. You'd expect it to go ultras, then supers, then softs, sort of in order of pace and people coming in, but Kvyat and Grosjean never really seemed to get themselves into the race. It was really interesting. As you will see as things go along, I think they do at one stage challenge us a little bit, but it's very weird. It's very weird how they don't get the tyres to switch on at all. As we come through onto the fifth lap, and I've turned it up into high power mode because I was probably getting as bored as you were watching us just go round, not really touching the other cars. You can see we're on the strategy which is fairly similar to the cars around us. A lot of them are pushing their engines a little bit harder than we were, but we sacrificed fuel from the line rather than burning fuel on the track, because it just feels like you get more from your lap. Why? It just feels like you get a more consistent lap times. You get perhaps slightly more of a benefit in the race. I've never done the research to figure it out. I just kind of go on my gut feeling on that one, which is sort of how this whole thing works, really. We've gone back to the hybrid mode, to ERS mode, just to try and get Alonso up past Raikkonen. It didn't really achieve much, just closed the gap a little bit. But it felt like Raikkonen was there for the taking for a lot of this stint, as I think we're about to find out. I was never really feeling like he could pull away from us. It felt like he was falling back towards us, and you can see we're taking him here. I think he gets us back in a corner or two. But yeah, it felt like Raikkonen didn't have any pace in his car. I don't know if he had problem, like a technical issue, or what the issue was with the car. But yeah, Raikkonen, it looked like, was pushing really hard and just couldn't get anything out of his car, which is very unusual for Kimi. And then we're sort of trying to fight off Raikkonen for this stint, whilst trying to also push up on Gasly, which is, anyone who's ever played any of the F1 games knows that's never ideal, because the more you fight, the more you fall. You can't really chase and fight at the same time. You have to kind of make a decision early. And it started costing some time. Raikkonen finally found his way past, kind of secured it. Then Perez forced his way past with the RS. There's a whole bunch going on. We're conserving tyres here, by the way, because things were starting to overheat, and I felt like maybe I could extend the stint. There was an argument that had I gone conserve, I could have taken these tyres probably the entire race distance and not had to pit, but we would have lost time. So yeah, I didn't feel like taking that risk. You see, we're back up fighting Gasly again, having started to cool our tyres, which is interesting. Having started to cool everything off, we started making up time, which didn't make a great deal of sense. Had I known that with hindsight, I would have started on the conserving of tyres right from the line and just made them go the whole distance, because they will, if you conserve them. I think you can get these tyres the full distance on most tracks, but you have to sort of weigh up, will you lose more time by conserving than you would by coming into change, and I usually feel like you probably do, otherwise there'd be no point having pit stops. I have done the odd race in my Motorsport Manager career where I've gone without pit stops entirely, but it's often a slog. You very rarely pick up good points. You can see here Hulkenberg into the pits, gifting us 8th, being the first man to blink on lap 12. And if you were sort of heading towards the pit cycle now, you're going to start seeing a few more guys coming in ahead of us, and I think Raikkonen comes in very shortly as well. So Kubica gets a chance to squeeze into the top 10. He's already taken Raikkonen normally, or he's got himself into a battle with Raikkonen. I think I switched to the battle very shortly. I think here I was looking at tyre temps, looking at rain, seeing what was coming in. I was looking at track temps, sorry, not tyre temps, just to see what the life cycle of the tyres was going to start looking like, or try to decide whether we kept conserving tyres long enough to make it through to a potential wet period that wasn't going to come. At this point, we sort of started to know it wasn't going to come. You can see there Raikkonen's pitted. Ricciardo has pitted as well, so it has Carlos Sainz. So a few cars dropped from ahead of us. I think it was just Leclerc coming in as well, giving Alonso another spot, pushing us up into 6th, which, you look at the 5 guys ahead of us and you just think those guys have got a pit. Alonso is at some point going to lead this race. It's just a case of building up that gap to Perez behind was the situation we were finding ourselves in. And we were building the gap to Perez behind. We're building up the recent gap already, and the gap was closing on some of the cars ahead of us too. We switched back to Kubica here because he's in a battle with Gasly and Grosjean for 8th, 9th and 10th really. They're battling for 8th. Ray Hall made a pit stop, and this is, I think, where I started to think about whether we could just give people a push. I think we gave Kubica a little bit more tyre to play with, just to get the temps up partially, but also to see if we could get him past the guys ahead up into 6th. You can see Alonso has moved up into 3rd with the pit stops happening around us. Ray Hall's come in, Verstappen has come in. The Fetchberg will return hopefully regular pace. If we'd started on the alternative strategy, the opposite strategy, where we'd gone from ultra softs to softs, I think we'd have found ourselves caught with too many cars ahead of us. I think starting on the hardest compound of tyre, it gave us more clear track ahead of us, which meant we were able to make up more time without having to fight people, whereas I think we'd have found ourselves fighting the way around. I think ultimately that would have cost us a lot of time. Apologies, by the way, if I keep stopping randomly mid-sentence. I have to drink a lot because I got massively sunburned over the weekend because I'm an idiot. And should be grateful actually the recording didn't pick up the mic when I first did this, and I had to re-record it because at one stage I turned in my chair and I caught my arm on something and I think I screamed just a little bit. It's not my finest hour, this sunburn. I'm looking a bit lobstery. You'll see some of it, I'm sure, in tomorrow's Passport to Poland video, or in the next Passport to Poland video, depending on when I finally get this thing finally recorded out. As Fernando Alonso, you can see, is leading. Kubica defending 7th from Pierre Gasly. Ricciardo is on his second set of ultra soft, so he is cutting his way through the field a little bit too. He's a man to keep an eye on behind us. But Grosjean, you see, has got himself up into 5th, despite starting badly, which is good for him because his start, I thought he was going to kind of start disappearing way off backwards into the distance. You can see Raikkonen and Rahal and co at the bottom of the field there, and not necessarily making up much ground on us, though Bottas is. So I think at this stage I decided to give Alonso the push on the tyres to try and build that gap, because Bottas and Hamilton were the guys leading the race before the pit cycle started, and I thought if I could build up a gap over them, I could kind of mitigate our pit stop just a touch on where we were coming up, because the crossover point on tyres was with about 17-ish laps remaining. I think in a second I have a click on the pit thing and I check just to see what the earliest I can get guys in for is, because then I can burn some tyres. I can make up a bit more ground and avoid getting past on the track if I could help it, because the pit window here is about 25-ish seconds, I think it is. You know, from pit lane to stop to the end of the pit lane, it ends up costing you about 25 seconds for a pit stop. So obviously, the more time you can pull out, the closer you can find yourself to the front of the field once you rotate through the pit stops. I think this is the bit where I start to check what we can get. So there's 23 laps remaining. A swap onto Ultrasoft would go CS:GO 18 comfortably, which is kind of the point where I knew I had to wait 5 laps, see it out, see what I could burn through on the tyres as well, on the soft tyres to play with to get us going. I had the same with Kubica as well, because I felt like Kubica might be able to get some positions, or at least build some kind of gap to the cars behind him if we let him push, because at this stage you're about to replace the tyres anyway. You may as well just start burning them up a touch, because it makes no difference really as long as you can start building up some speed. So that's what we're doing. Following Alonso on in first, though, he led quite a few laps of the race. Built up a 2.4 second gap already, as you can see. Tyres were overheating, the tyre overheating messages, the worn tyres message, everything. Kubica's just having a moan on the radio like he's Lewis Hamilton moaning to Charlie Whiting. You can see we picked up a 2.6 second gap at this stage in the race, and we're sort of counting down the laps remaining. With 21 remaining, we're kind of 4-ish from the pit window. We should be able to make it. I think we make it sort of last, just about eke it out. And then, like I said, we started having the real questions about when do we start bringing people in for pits. Kubica already complaining about coming into the pits for tyres. Alonso complaining about them being overheated, which is fair comment. Though Bottas has managed to turn on his pair of softs and is starting to catch us a little bit. But you know, the important thing is to not have them too close when you finally come for a stop as we cross into lap 20, and we're able to start seeing potentially what's going on with the race. We gave a little push to Kubica there just to achieve something, I'm sure, but I don't remember what it was, because this is not in the moment right now. We've dropped everything back down to neutral, because I think I realised that the best way to extend this stint and still have some pace left in the tyres was to maybe not completely rag them to death. So Bottas, 2.5 second gap there. It's pretty comfortable, 4.2 back to Hamilton. Really good. Vettel setting a fastest sector 3. Although I think Alonso comes round in a second and sets his fastest lap of the race. Or maybe that was the lap before this, I don't know. It's the trouble with not doing it live. I can't react to things as they happen. I have to kind of think back. Right, this is where we start to think about what's the pit window here, because Kubica, you can see, has 16 to 18 on a pit stop. I decided to bring in Alonso here, I think, because obviously it's a good time to bring him in, or it was starting to look like a good time to bring him in. So I had to push on the tyres a touch as well, conserve on Kubica's, because Kubica wouldn't have made it. And then it became time to really consider, like, what do we bring in Alonso? Do we bring him in as he rounds the last corner? We're going to push out that ERS, just try and increase that gap. It was at 3.3 as we crossed the line, which is a pretty solid gap. I think Bottas made a mistake in there somewhere, or I think he's about to make a mistake, and there we go, we settle in to make the change onto the ultra softs to take us to the end of the race. I think the event and a slow pit stop for us is about 2.5, and 0.8 wouldn't have made a great deal of difference in this race, so I hit the safe button, which should have brought us out somewhere around 6. And I think I decided to watch him come in at some point very shortly, I believe. I make the decision that actually what I could do is double stack the drivers, because there is 20 seconds between them, and it won't make a big difference. One would essentially be leaving the pits as the other one came in, and I think this is roughly where I come to that conclusion, if I'm not mistaken, because we're following Alonso in regular one-time speed, because I want to be able to change his as he comes into the pits, which is actually always a good idea. Max Verstappen ran wide. I think Bottas just ran wide as well, which is why Hamilton has moved up into second. And yeah, there we go. We've sort of started to have a look at, can we do this? It looks like we can do it with Kubica, so we will. Because why wouldn't we do that with Kubica? That makes all the sense in the world. Let's double stack the driver and put him on safe as well. He'll come out in 17th. I probably could have brought him out a place or two higher, because there were cars around him within-ish striking distance that I could have gained on. But ultimately it wasn't going to be worth it, because Kubica could manage to lose places if he was the only car on track. So, you know, you just try and go for a safe pit stop, not make any mistakes, and demoralise your pit crew a little bit. You can see as Alonso is coming round into the pits here, we've dropped him down to neutral. He's coming with a 4.6 second gap as he's entered the pit lane, which, like I said, it's a 20 second or 25 second-ish sacrifice to make the stop. You can see we're stationary for 2.2 there, which is pretty solid. We're also the only car on track that's coming out with ultras. It brings us out in 6th, just behind Charles Leclerc, and we can hit straight on that ERS and get on the chase, which is always important as Kubica comes in as well. And again, he's looking at, you know, 25 seconds out of his race, but Kubica is very, very rarely the guy you look to be the one to pick up big place. He's done a 2.1, so a tenth of a second quicker on that pit stop, which is quite nice for us. You can see we're already on the back of Leclerc, and actually that pit stop has cost us 20 seconds in the grand scheme of things, 5 seconds behind Hamilton. We are at this point catching Hamilton rapidly. You can see that 14 seconds on the left hand side, and it is going down at a rate of knots. We're head to head with Charles Leclerc, but yeah, 14.5 seconds is kind of where we're at as we pass him. And it does start, although we are back and forthing for a little bit. I think we end up stuck behind Leclerc. We were catching up to Hamilton. I think if we cleanly got past Leclerc there and just kept going, we probably would have disappeared from him. But we now start sort of a long period at the back of Leclerc's gearbox, and I had to start working out, like, how do I get Alonso up past Leclerc, because you see that gap in the first sector. We do make up quite a lot of time throughout the race. We were among the quickest teams through the first sector, as far as I could tell, despite the fact we never set our fastest first sector. It always felt like, especially when we were chasing Ferraris, always felt like we were picking up time on the Ferraris as we came through the first sector, and then the next two sectors they'd start pulling away. It was very weird, but they never pulled away enough that we couldn't catch up. Like, it felt like if we could put in a good sort of second sector or a good third sector, as well as that first sector, we probably catch up and take him pretty much in a heartbeat. I mean, you can see actually we're probably into sector 3 already, and sector 3 is where we're losing all the big time. You know, we've gone from half a second at the start of the third sector behind to, you can see here, we're 0.7. It goes up as well to like 0.8 as well as we cross the line, I believe. It was interesting. It was interesting to see Alonso would make up time so early in the lap, and then he would have that third sector where we could still put in our fastest sector of the race in. See a 1:14 personal best lap, and get back within range of Leclerc, and it would look like maybe we'd start thinking about making a pass here. We're sort of 0.3 in, back to 0.4 through that corner, and then things sort of start backing off again as we go through this middle sector, and it's kind of weirdly inconsistent. It's not great. We don't ever seem to fully be pegging um, Charles Leclerc back in any way, and we should be on significantly quicker tyres, which is kind of disappointing when you get into it. But we've got 13 laps remaining. We're on course still for a good finish. Got to keep an eye on Graham Rahal, who's currently sitting in 10th, because we're trying to get a points haul over Red Bull. Obviously, we have the lone driver in the points for us. Alonso Rahal is the lone driver in the points for Red Bull. With Kubica and Gasly currently fighting way back down the order. The ideal thing would have been that Kubica takes Gasly out just to eliminate any possibility of Gasly getting points, but apparently he drives fairly, which is mean. Yeah, we're half a second behind Charles Leclerc, consistently half a second behind. I've just hit the ERS button to try and catch up. Brought us to within 0.4 of him. I think I deployed it at the wrong time. I think I sort of started trying to be more strategic with our ERS deployment. I tried to wait until we got within half a second of him, and then smashing it to try and get past him, and it wasn't quite enough to make it work. I try and deploy ERS sometimes like it's DRS, and it doesn't really do the job. But you see, we're currently within the last 10 laps of the race. We're chasing down Leclerc. We're sitting in 5th. We're a comfortable gap behind us to Perez, who's on fresher tyres, but the gap is fairly comfortable behind us, and that's going to kind of help us out towards the end. Kubica is the guy who's really in the challenge, and now I'm watching this back. I wish I'd switched to Kubica because he's actually in more of a race than Alonso is, because Alonso is just kind of slowly catching up to him and backing off of Leclerc. He's currently in conserved tyre mode just because I was worried a little bit about making these tyres get to the end and overheating them, which is a constant battle in a place like Brazil, where you have this sort of very hot track where no matter what tyres you put on, if you don't conserve them, they will find a way to overheat. 8 laps to go as well. It became a bit of a almost to just see this out to the end kind of race rather than a can we seriously challenge. You can see at one stage now we've got back from being 2 seconds behind Leclerc, getting ourselves a little bit of clean air, to just trying to keep up with him. I think at that stage I decided to let Kubica have the extra tyres to push, letting off the ERS to push, try and get him up past Lando Norris. But we're sticking with the real battle here, the battle for points, because there were points up for grabs with Leclerc just ahead of us. And like I said, it became a bit of a cat and mouse thing. We had, like I say, Vettel ahead of us too, a long way ahead of us. Bottas and Hamilton are off in the distance. They're 20 seconds clear. The only way for us to pick up points in any way, shape or form here is going to be another guy making a pit stop ahead of us. And in the final 5 laps, you think someone would have to have really boned their tyre strategy to need to make an extra stop now, although Raikkonen, if you look on the left hand side, looks like he needs to make a stop, which will buy Kubica a single place, but it will also put Rahal up into the points, which is not where we want him to be, even if it's only one. Avoid him getting it if we can. I think at this point I'm conserving tyres briefly because we're about to overheat, and like I said, the trouble trying to get past Leclerc, apart from the fact his car is massively better than ours, the trouble with trying to get past Leclerc was every time we did the pushing we needed to do to get near him, our tyres would overheat. So I had to start backing off again, letting him go, and you can see there's a 2.5 second gap from us at this point. But trying to keep on top of track temps is a real battle. And there's 3 laps to go here. I think at this point I decided, screw it, let's just throw everything at the wall. See if we can get this gap back. That's where I'm consulting, see what we can get off these tyres. 5 to 7 laps was the report, was the verdict from the guy on the wall. So that's what we went with. And yeah, we're just going to go for a push towards the end now. See if we can get these tyres to make do. I think I decided to give Kubica the pushing as well, although Kubica's tyres never go as far as you think they will, because Robert Kubica cannot look after tyres. You can see the little green icon ahead of us. Charles Leclerc made the weird decision to make a pit stop with 2 laps remaining, take off tyres that definitely if he conserved them, would have got him 2 laps anyway, and he's just going to start hemorrhaging places now. You can see he drops below Perez, below Verstappen. I think Ricciardo takes him at one stage as well. Really drops down the order, and actually he would have been better off just sitting where he was, and just backing off, because I think he'd have lost 1 position rather than losing 2 or 3. And we're just kind of seeing it through to the end here. It really did fall on us just trying to control Kubica's pace, because there's no one around Fernando Alonso at this point. He's got the nearest guy behind him is 17 seconds behind. He's currently sitting 13 seconds, 14 seconds behind Vettel in third, behind the podium places. So it became a case of let's just try and manage Kubica to the end, because we're going to try and keep him on top of these tyres, that although they were wearing out quite rapidly, and I think this is the last lap. It is the last lap. And this is where things start to go wrong, because I think maybe I pushed his tyres a little bit too hard. All the grip was gone. He was not getting any performance off of them as Hamilton crosses the line for the victory. He was not getting the performance out of the tyres that you'd think he might. So it became, I thought I could push him into 12th, and actually I think what I ended up doing was absolutely boning the guy, because his tyres are just dropping from this point. I went up into high overtake mode, or high fuel mode, because there was some fuel to burn. We had a little bit of excess, and I thought I'd try and get rid of it and see if I could push some people up the order. But even having all the excess fuel on the planet was not going to be enough to get Kubica any more places. You can see just how quick Gasly is catching him on your screens. You don't need me to tell you how rapidly that gap is closing as we come towards the last couple of corners, and you can see Gasly's going to take him for 13th. He's going to lose that quite easily, and then Hulkenberg's going to come through and take 14th, and then Giovinazzi is the next guy up the road. Giovinazzi is also going to have a go, as you'd expect, and take himself up to 15th. And that was kind of the race for us. Albon, I think, is chasing up fast behind, but doesn't quite have the ability or the pace to make it over the line. And you can see we've finished the race with Alonso in 14th, Kubica in 16th. It's a nice, easy one. Kubica came very close, actually, to being lapped, which would not have been a good look for us when we've got a guy chasing us. Or wouldn't it look good look for Kubica, I should say. Well, we've got a guy who was just outside the podium places, and I think we skipped this very quickly. We did, because if you leave that in for too long, my God, FIA comes down hard on you. I had to re-edit an entire video once because I used like 1/5 of a second too much of that clip, which is built into the mod. It's nothing I can do something about. I don't know how to get rid of it and get the old one back, or I would do, because I'm not a monster. But that was how that went. So just a quick save game here before we get through the wrapping up of the episode. And yeah, things have gone fairly well for us in the grand scheme of things. So always good to see what's going on. You can see the tyre strategies. Leclerc made a 2-stop, a very late, pointless 2-stop. Hulk made a 2-stop. So did Sainz and Raikkonen. 2-stop was not the way around this track today, it has to be said. And things just kind of look good for us. So the championship standings, you can see no one's really made significant movements for us. Grosjean going up 2 places to start catching Kubica. Alonso is still chasing down Daniel Ricciardo though, which is going to be good. And then you can see that we have a 16-point deficit to Red Bull, but we've also built up a 24-point lead above the next best team, which I think was Renault, but we'll see again in a second, because for some reason I decided to click there and it showed us twice. You see the 10-second penalty for Vettel doesn't quite bring us up to third, but it did bring the gap down to less than 10 seconds. It's a shame really we couldn't find that extra bit of pace across the course of the race to steal that podium away. Bottas in the Drivers' Championship, and yeah, you can see we've just built up that gap behind us to Renault, which is always beneficial. always beneficial as we come to the end of the race. And yeah, got the traditional loading screen as we find our way out to the end of the episode. We're going to have a quick look just to see how that's affected all of our marketability, how it's affected all of our drivers, see if any of them have improved, developed, any relationships have changed. This loading screen takes way longer when you watch it back than it does when you're actually playing the game. Just a thought. Just a casual passing thought whilst I'm re-recording audio for the episode. These are things that I feel like I should keep in my head and learn from, but I don't. So, there we go. If you're wondering why I don't post-record the commentary on episodes more often, so I can cut them down. By the way, I tried it for a couple of episodes and it ended up taking like 6 hours to make an episode. It was awful. We've managed to salvage our marketability up to 100%. There's also an improvement in the mechanic relationship for Robert Kubica, which worked out quite nicely. And I believe you're about to see, apart from the improvement in George Russell somehow through not driving, you're about to see that we've made a £4,000 loss on the weekend, which is a pretty good return for us actually in the grand scheme of things. And yeah, so this is the confirmation of the standings, the results that it gives us at the end of the event summary, and nothing new to learn there really. It's looking like it's going to be a Hamilton win for the title. He needs about, I think he needs to pick up 5-6 points at the next race, and he's secured the title. And he should pick up 5 or 6 points to secure the title at some stage this season quite easily, because he always seems to be somewhere near the top of the order. There's no chance of anyone chasing him down unless he DNFs the next 3 races and they all have the same winner. Right, that's going to be the end of the episode, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, I've been Chasing Lamely. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. And until next time, take it easy, be safe, and have yourselves a good one. Bye.